So if we take a look here, we now have a flow panel with our 4 rich items that we talked about a few moments ago. This flow panel will flow these items from left to right, wrapping when we run out of space. We've also created our own designer for this flow panel to handle move of its children. We haven't gone and built all the functionality for resize and other behaviors that you might want. We'll show you how this simple example works. So right now, there's not a convenient way to set a property in markup to set up a new designer that I've built elsewhere. So we actually do a little work using a design filter. That's the thing that is going to determine when I go to an element and try and use a designer, which designer should I use? So we've hooked in here to provide our own custom move designer. So you'll see that we've created this flow panel move designer that's inheriting from this interface iMove designer. So there's a couple of conceptual operations that we know are interesting across layouts. One of them is moving children, and the other one is resizing myself. It's because all layouts have an understanding of how to lay out their children, and all layouts have an understanding of what they allow their children to do in terms of resizing. So if I were to go and create a new layout, I'm going to provide specific heuristics on what's allowed in each of these scenarios. So if I create a designer, I need to provide logic about how to design for these 2 operations, moving and resizing. In this case, we'll go ahead and do move. So right here, we're going to go ahead and implement our move child, which is what our behavior is going to call when it wants to move one of the children of this flow panel. We, of course, have a point and the element that a point that we're going to, a point we're coming from, and the element that we're trying to move. So we do a little error checking at the top. And we go ahead and use layout to find out a little bit about the actual 2D structure of the element that I'm over with this point that I'm trying to move to. In an absolute positioning case, this is just going to be the point that I'm actually going to go ahead and move my object to. I don't really have to do anything special. In the flow panel case, I actually have to see what object I'm over top of. If I'm over myself, certainly I'm not going to move. If I'm over some object that contains me, I'm not going to move. But if I'm over another object, I may want to move when I drop. So we go ahead and we use this in a few places. You might have noticed this transform. This is to make sure that if anyone's applied interesting transforms, including rotations, anything else on our object, that we can actually get to the same coordinate system as that flow panel, so that we're using the same coordinates. We don't have to know about the transforms that are actually applied. So we also do a little bit of checking that I mentioned. We make sure that the object we're trying to drop on is a valid object. And then depending on a few things, we'll decide where to move that element within the tree hierarchy. So you'll see that we do this check on flow direction. So I mentioned flow panel flows from left to right by default. Well, that's only the default. I can certainly change flow panel to flow from right to left. So in my designer, because I know about flow panel's logic, I can build that in. So I'm going to check and see if we're in the left to right case. We happen to be here. I'm then going to check which half of the element I'm over that I'm trying to drop on. If I'm over the left half and I let go, I'm going to want to move the object to the left side of the one I dropped on. If I'm over the right half, the heuristic we've decided on is that I'll drop on the right side. These are just heuristics, and you could go ahead and create whatever behavior you'd like. Then we just go ahead and do the logic of moving our nodes in the tree. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like. I'm going to build and run our application. So I've got all my rich objects here. The text used up the entire length of my window. So the next object flowed to the next line. It's the video, then the text box, then the button. Now if I grab one of these and move, you'll notice that it jumps positions depending on which half of the other object I'm over. I can move the video around, I can move it to the top, I can move the text around. So I can provide very custom behavior. Yes? Certainly. So when I showed you before how we created adorners when there was a resize or rotate, I could also specify an adorner or a grab handle or some type of feedback when I'm doing a move. If I was doing a general application, I might want to have an alpha shaded rectangle over that, similar to what you see in Windows Explorer when I'm moving files around. You can provide whatever feedback you'd like. I'll actually take a minute here and go into one more example of extensibility that shows you what types of feedback you can supply using this adorner layer that's drawing our grab handles in the scenarios I showed you. So it just so happens that I have one more example here that has been pre-built. I'm back to using a canvas in this case. And I've decided I want to use that feedback layer, that adorner layer that draws on top of my elements to do some custom feedback. In fact, I'm going to build a custom behavior to do some logic based on that feedback. I'm going to build rubber band behavior. It was actually great to see the keynotes. I noticed in the Merck demo, they actually did this little rubber band over part of their graph and then used the selection there to drill into another view. You can actually use this on your objects in a view like that to do really custom behavior. So today, I'm just going to push this behavior to be the active thing running when I do a mouse down. So we'll see this mouse down handler in my XAML. If we flip over to the code, I'm actually doing this little bit of logic here where I'm pushing this behavior. Editing really has the notion of one active behavior at a time, because an end user can only be doing one operation at a time. There's only one mouse. There's only one keyboard. Certainly those operations can be interrupted by other operations. If I'm moving something and then zoom using keyboard, I should be able to go ahead and zoom and then go back to my move operation seamlessly. So here I'm just going to push this as the active behavior, my rubber band. I'm going to create a rubber band behavior, just extending off our base class of edit behavior. Edit behavior is very simple. All it understands is how to attach events and unattach events when certain interesting operations happen. We notice this push where I said I'm pushing my rubber band behavior. Well, something else may have been active at that time, so it needed to be suspended and remove its handlers. So I'm going to skip ahead over the attach a little bit. I'll just point out that I'm just registering on attach the handlers that I'm interested in. For rubber band, it's simply moving and my mouse button coming back up because I'm going to stop my behavior at that point. Now, when the mouse moves, we're simply going to go ahead and draw our rubber band. And you'll notice we're drawing it on this scope. which is really where this behavior has been set. In our case, it's set on this design surface. So I know what the extents of the visual that I can draw on are. I've also talked about how one thing can be active at a time. So when our left mouse button comes up here, you'll notice we're popping this behavior off of the stack of behaviors that are available right now. It's no longer active. We'll remove it. Let's go ahead and take a look at the actual draw code here. So all we're doing in this code is creating a brush for a custom color. In this case, we've created something that is slightly opaque, so you can see through the elements underneath. And we're using the adorner layer that I mentioned to go ahead and draw on top of these elements. So I just go ahead on the adorner layer, add a new visual. I'm adding this new rubber band drawing that I created. Let's go ahead and run this and see what it looks like with just this default logic. So you'll notice I'm in a canvas again, so all of my items are stacked up. And go ahead and move those so you can see them. I'll actually resize this window. Now I've created this rubber band behavior. If I go ahead and encircle all of these items, there's some logic in there that will go ahead and figure out which items I'm over completely and select them. I've now done multiple selection. I've gotten that custom feedback on top of my adorner layer. The other cool thing I haven't shown you yet is, hey, I've got multiple selection. Let's go ahead and move those objects. Oh, wow, they all move, and my video still plays. Let's go one better. Let's go back to this project. That was pretty cool. But some people were telling me, your demos really don't show all of the power that they could. A lot of these things were shown in some other demos. What can you do to spice this up a little bit? So I noticed that the adorners and rubber band look pretty vanilla. They aren't really exciting. And some people may be wondering if they're special or if they can really use the full power of the platform. So a couple of hours ago, I figured out how to do some animation. Not my forte. Yes, I was biting my nails as I edited this code. And I'm going to go ahead and set up some animation that's going to spin through some colors. And this block of logic is going to do that. And then when I make my brush here, I'm actually going to add my custom color animation. I'm going to build that and hope it all works. So we have the same situation we had before. Let's put the video over here. Now you'll notice my colors in my rubber band on the adorner layer are actually animated seamlessly over top of video that's running. I didn't have to know anything about the content that was going to be here. It just works. I actually didn't have to know much about animation because I didn't. I can select those items as I did before. Do everything I did.